guys, welcome back to JW Deep Sky. Today we've got 3 easy summer targets for you to capture when you've got some clear nights to work with. So let's get into it. So I finally had 3 clear nights in a row after weeks of rain, clouds, Canadian smoke, thunderstorms. But that's probably my fault because I literally can't stop buying astro gear. But with these clear nights ahead, I decided to go to my favorite dark sky site, which is Assateague Island in Maryland. And by the way, check out this awesome view I have.
And you can see Venus out already.
So this was the first time I was able to capture an emission nebula with my modified DSLR, so I was pretty happy about that. But unfortunately the bugs were pretty outrageous and I had to rush my polar alignment because of it and ended up with elongated stars and only 35 minutes worth of integration. But despite that, the image still turned out pretty cool. And I mentioned in my first video that I'm still a beginner. I've only been doing astrophotography for like 2 months, so any decent picture I get, I'll be happy with. And since I'm still in the learning process, I'm just doing a bunch of trial and error. But as I learn more, I'll be taking more accurately tracked, much longer pictures. So the 3 targets I imaged were the Lagoon Nebula, the Milky Way, and M13, the Hercules cluster. So like I said, for my first target, which was the Lagoon Nebula, I had to rush my polar alignment because the bugs were just unstoppable down there. It's just hot and there just happens to be a lot of bugs during this time. So I actually ended up getting 2 hours worth of pictures, but for some reason Deep Sky Stacker wouldn't stack more than 70 of those pictures, and I think it was because the polar alignment was so bad, which caused really badly elongated stars, so it had trouble registering the stars in the pictures. And I could have tried Serial to stack the pictures, but I don't actually know how to stack pictures in Serial without all of the calibration frames. I only took dark frames for calibration that night, so I don't know if there's a script that's built into Serial that allows you to stack pictures without the calibration frames, or if there's one out there somewhere that I could use. But I'm not worried about it because in the future I'm just going to take all the calibration frames. So I ended up with 35 minutes of 30-second exposures on the target. And like I said, this is the first emission nebula I was able to capture with my modified DSLR. But even with only 35 minutes of exposure time, I was still very impressed with how much color and detail came through on the picture. And supposedly, a modified DSLR is able to capture 4 times as much hydrogen alpha data as a stock DSLR. And it really showed for this picture. And I'll show all the pictures at the end. So the next picture I took, I didn't actually take it. I just basically had my coworker set up his camera and I told him all the settings and what he needed to do to get a nice Milky Way picture. Also that night, we attempted to set up a 10-inch Meade Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope that he got for free from one of his friends. But it turned out we were missing the little diagonal mirror piece that the eyepieces go into, so we were unable to set it up and use it. And we're still wondering about turning that thing into an astrophotography beast because it has a focal length of over 2,000 millimeters. So that would be great for like galaxies and other deep sky objects and planets, of course. But we're still figuring out the logistics of it. But we also might just sell it because some guy offered him $1,500 just for the OTA itself. So we could use that just to get more practical gear. So after setting up the Meade, realizing we didn't have the parts to use it, and then breaking it down and packing it up, my coworker brought out his camera and wanted to learn a few things. So I was kind of looking around, and I was just looking around at the sky and saw the Milky Way just stretching across the whole sky. So of course, the first picture I would recommend taking is a Milky Way shot if you're just starting out. So that's what I had him do. I had him set up his camera on the tripod that I use for recording videos. And I had him set his ISO to 3200 to start, but I think we moved up to 6400 for the final picture. And we did the 500 rule. We figured out how long his exposures need to be or could be without getting star trails, and his focal length was at lowest 24 millimeters. So we set it to that. We figured out that the maximum exposure time would be about 20 seconds. So we did 20-second exposures, ISO 6400, and I had issues focusing. I didn't look for any bright stars. I just kind of was trying to focus where I was pointed, but that's not a good idea. You always want to look for a very bright star to focus on because it just makes it a lot easier. But the picture that we ended up with was pretty in focus, so I was fine with it. So we tried a couple different foregrounds and just a couple different angles on the Milky Way. and the picture turned out pretty great. And this is actually the first time I was able to successfully get a good Milky Way picture. And we were using his stock DSLR for this picture, so now I'm excited to use my modified DSLR and maybe a more appropriate Milky Way lens, like a 14mm or so. So also that same night, I tried to capture the Eagle Nebula, and it just didn't work out. I was either out of focus or there were too many lights coming in. Like there were definitely some cars with their headlights on and like some boats floating by with huge bright lights on. And there was just too much light that night. So I ended up having to just throw away the picture. So that whole picture was wasted, but at least we got the Milky Way shot. So I was happy about that. And that's the thing, like not all of your imaging sessions are gonna work out the way you plan, but just try to appreciate like the learning experience of it. You know, take what you learned that night and apply it the next time you go out. So the last picture I took was of M13, the Hercules cluster. And I took this one from my backyard instead of at the dark sky site that I go to. So I was looking around in Stellarium and I figured M13 would be a good target because it's nice and bright and I wouldn't have to worry about pulling out any like nebula details in my light polluted backyard. And this is before I had any light pollution filters. I did recently just pick up the SV Boni UHC filter, so I'll be using that in future videos. But I do also plan on getting better light pollution filters and a dual band filter. I'll probably end up getting the Optolong L Pro just for a broadband filter, and maybe the Optolong L Enhance for a dual narrowband filter. And another side note, I do have a lot of other real nice, exciting gear coming, and stay tuned for that. So for M13, I set up and I polar aligned, and I was getting pretty nice stars at a minute, but I think I decided to go down to 30 seconds because it's just sharper stars, and I didn't really need to pull out like a lot of special detail because it's all just stars anyway. But it was kind of a pain to frame up the target because it was literally directly above me, so I was using the viewfinder kind of like that to just get under the camera, and eventually I was able to frame up my target. I used, there's like 4 stars in the Hercules constellation that are like right in the center of it, and then the one on the top left is close to the Hercules cluster, which is a little bit to the right of it, so that made it kind of easy to find the cluster. But once I actually got the target into my frame and was looking at it on my computer screen, it was awesome. And I'm shooting at 360mm focal length, so it was pretty small on the screen, but it was still pretty breathtaking. And I was using Backyard EOS for the first time, which is just a software that you can control your Canon camera throughout your session. And here's a clip from that night.
Hey guys, well, it may be a bit dark out here. I'm in the backyard. It's dark, but we're working on 30-second subs on the Hercules star cluster, M13. And let's check out the subs. So here we have Backyard EOS, which I'm using to control my Canon camera while it's hooked up to the rest of my rig. And you can expand the view and look at that. Wow. That, so far, is a pretty nice shot of the Hercules cluster.
So it was pretty great having 3 clear nights in a row after such bad weather for so long, but the imaging sessions could have gone better. I'm very excited to capture some of the fall and winter targets, and by the time they roll around, I'll be ready. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.